There's a lighter in my kitchen drawer that doesn't work anymore, and I still can't throw it away. It's cheap plastic, the kind you buy at a gas station for $2. The flint wheel is worn smooth now, it hasn't sparked in probably 6 years, but every time I clean out that drawer, I pick it up, turn it over in my hand, and put it right back where it was. I've never told anyone why, not because it's some huge secret, it's just that the story doesn't sound like much when you say it out loud. Two guys went camping, that's it, that's the whole premise. Nobody warns you that the biggest thing that ever happens to you can look from the outside like absolutely nothing at all. I was 21, my best friend Eli was 22. We'd known each other since we were 11, since the kind of friendship that starts because your moms are in the same book club and neither of you wants to be there. We grew up 2 streets apart. We learned to skateboard in the same driveway badly. We got matching bad haircuts in 9th grade because we thought it looked cool and it did not. By the time we were in our 20s, Eli was the person I called first. Good news, bad news, didn't matter, he answered. That August, everything was about to change and neither of us was saying it out loud. He got a job offer in another state, something in logistics, decent pay, real adult stuff. I was staying local, finishing my last year of school. We both knew this camping trip was the last time it would be easy. After this, it would be flights and time zones, and we should really call more. So we packed up his beat-up Corolla with a tent that had seen better days, a cooler, way too many hot dogs, and drove 4 hours to a lake nobody's ever heard of. I want to be honest about something before I keep going. I didn't go on that trip thinking anything was going to happen between us. If you'd asked me the week before, I would have laughed. Eli was my best friend. I loved him the way you love a brother you chose. That's what I would have said, and I would have meant it because I didn't have better words yet. We got to the campsite around 4 in the afternoon, and the first hour was just us being idiots. The tent poles didn't match the instructions, or we just didn't read them, and we ended up with this lopsided little structure that looked like it was actively giving up. This is structurally sound, Eli said, standing back with his hands on his hips, looking at our sad, sagging tent like it was the Sistine Chapel. It's leaning, I said. It's got character. It's going to fall on us at 3 in the morning. Then we'll die together, very romantic. He said it as a joke. I laughed because it was a joke. Neither of us thought about it again for hours. I bring it up now because it's funny, looking back, how many little things like that happened before either of us understood what they meant. We spent the afternoon doing nothing important. We hiked around the lake a little, got our shoes wet, argued about whether a heron we saw was actually a heron or just a really committed seagull. Eli has this laugh that comes out before he means it to, like it escapes him, and I remember thinking that afternoon, not for the first time, that I liked being the one who caused it. By the time the sun started going down, we had a fire going, mostly because Eli insisted on being the one to build it even though I'm pretty sure I'm better at it. You just used an entire lighter fluid bottle, I said. It's called being efficient. It's called being a hazard. Same thing, really. We sat there with the fire cracking and popping, plates balanced on our knees, and it was easy, the way it always was with him. That's the part I want you to understand. Nothing about that night felt like it was building toward something big. It felt like every other night we'd ever spent together except for one thing. At some point, maybe an hour into sitting there, the conversation went quiet in a way it usually didn't with us. We're both talkers. Silence wasn't really our language, but this silence wasn't uncomfortable, it was just full, like something was sitting in it that neither of us wanted to name. Are you nervous, I asked him, about the job moving? He poked at the fire with a stick before answering. Yeah, he said, not about the job part, that part's fine. What part then? He didn't answer right away. The fire popped. Somewhere out on the lake something splashed. I don't know, he said finally, just leaving stuff, people. You'll make new friends, you're annoyingly likable. That's not. He stopped himself, shook his head a little like he was arguing with something internally. Never mind. I should have pushed, I didn't. I let it go because I didn't know yet that I wanted to know the answer more than I was letting myself admit. We stayed up late that first night, later than we meant to, and by the time we crawled into the tent, the fire mostly ash, the air had gone properly cold, that kind of cold that gets into your bones near water. The tent was small. We hadn't really thought that part through when we bought it 2 years ago for a completely different, much less complicated trip. There was maybe 8 inches between our sleeping bags. I remember being aware of that distance in a way I hadn't been aware of before and being confused about why I was aware of it at all. "Night," he said, voice already thick with sleep. "Night." I lay there a long time after his breathing evened out, staring at the shape of the tent ceiling sagging slightly above us, listening to him breathe and not understanding why my chest felt tight. I told myself it was the trip. The change is coming, nothing more complicated than that. I was wrong, obviously, but I didn't know that yet. The second day was when things started shifting, though neither of us said anything. We went out on this rented canoe that the campground office practically had to beg someone to rent because it was clearly older than both of us combined. Eli sat in the back, steering badly, and I sat in the front getting splashed every time he adjusted his paddle. "You're doing that on purpose," I said. "I would never." He absolutely was. At one point we stopped paddling and just drifted out in the middle of this quiet lake, sun high, water so still it looked like glass. Eli leaned back on his hands, tilted his face up toward the sun, eyes closed, and I remember looking at him, really looking, the way you don't usually let yourself look at your best friend, and feeling something shift low in my stomach that I didn't have a name for. It wasn't a lightning bolt. People always describe these moments like lightning bolts, like the sky opens up and you suddenly know everything. It wasn't like that. It was quieter. It was more like realizing a light had been on in a room the whole time and you just never noticed it because you'd never needed to look at it directly. I looked away fast before he opened his eyes, embarrassed by my own thoughts in a way I couldn't explain to myself. "You good?" he asked, eyes still closed. "Yeah, why?" "You went quiet." "Just tired." He hummed like he didn't quite believe me, but he let it go, the way he always let things go with me, trusting that I'd tell him eventually if it mattered. That night we didn't have as much luck with the fire, the wood was damper, and it kept threatening to die no matter what we did, so we ended up huddled closer to it than the night before, shoulders almost touching, passing a bag of trail mix back and forth without really talking. "Can I ask you something weird?" Eli said, out of nowhere, staring into the fire instead of at me. "Since when do you ask permission for something weird?" "I'm serious." Something in his voice made me sit up a little straighter. "Okay, go." "Do you ever feel like," he stopped, started again. "Do you ever feel like there's a version of your life you're supposed to be living and you're not living it and you don't know how to start?" I didn't answer right away because the honest answer scared me a little. "Sometimes," I said. "Yeah." "Yeah," he echoed, quiet. "Is this about the job?" "Not really." He picked at the label on his water bottle, not looking at me. "I don't know, forget it." "You can't just say something like that and then say forget it." "Why not?" "Because now I'm going to be up all night wondering what you meant." That got a small laugh out of him at least. "Don't overthink it," he said. "I'm just being weird, ignore me." I didn't ignore him. I thought about it for the rest of the night, turning his words over, wondering if he meant something specific, wondering if I was imagining a meaning that wasn't there because of my own confusing feelings from that afternoon on the canoe. The storm hit on the third night and it hit fast. We'd heard there was rain in the forecast, but nothing about severe, nothing about the kind of storm that makes the whole tent shudder like it's breathing. It started as a few fat drops while we were washing dishes at the little spigot near our site, and within 20 minutes the sky had gone that strange greenish-gray color and the wind picked up hard enough to knock over our folding chairs. "We should get in the tent," Eli said, already grabbing gear. "Genius observation." "Shut up and grab the cooler." We scrambled, soaked within minutes, laughing despite ourselves the way you do when a situation gets so chaotic it loops back around into funny. By the time we got everything zipped into the tent and collapsed inside, we were both drenched, breathing hard, water dripping off both of us onto the tent floor. The storm didn't let up. If anything, it got worse. Wind slammed into the tent walls, the poor lopsided structure creaking in ways that made both of us go quiet, listening, waiting to see if it would hold. "Tell me this thing isn't going to collapse," I said. "It's fine." "You don't sound sure." "I'm very sure," he said, in a tone that made it extremely clear he was not sure at all. We ended up sitting close together in the middle of the tent, away from the walls, knees almost touching, listening to the storm scream outside. At some point the wind gusted hard enough that the whole tent lurched sideways, and Eli's hand shot out and grabbed my arm on instinct, the two of us bracing against each other without thinking about it. The tent was held. The wind died down to something less terrifying, but neither of us moved for a second longer than we needed to. "You can let go of my arm," I said, though I didn't actually want him to. "Right, sorry." He let go, sat back slightly, put a little distance between us that felt, for the first time all trip, deliberate. We didn't say much after that. The rain kept going, steady now instead of violent, drumming on the tent in a rhythm that should have been soothing and instead felt like it was counting down to something. "Can I tell you something?" Eli said, after a long stretch of just rain sounds. "You keep asking that, yes, always yes." He was quiet for another few seconds. In the dark, lit only by the weak glow of a lantern between us, I could see him working something out in his face, jaw tight, eyes somewhere on the tent floor. "I don't think I want to take that job," he said. I blinked. Whatever I'd been braced for, it wasn't that. "What, why not? You've been talking about it for months." "I know. So why?" "Because I don't want to leave," he said, too fast, like it had been sitting behind his teeth for days and finally broke loose. "And I've been telling myself it's about the job being wrong or the timing being wrong, but it's not any of that. I just don't want to leave." "Leave the state." "Leave you," he said. The rain kept going. The lantern flickered slightly. I didn't say anything for what felt like an embarrassingly long time because my brain had stopped working properly. "Eli, I know how that sounds," he said quickly, already backpedaling, already looking like he regretted opening his mouth. "I don't mean it like I just mean you're my best friend, and the idea of not seeing you every week, it messes with my head more than it should, and I don't know what that means, and I've been trying to figure out how to say it all week, and I'm doing it badly, and I'm sorry. Just forget I said anything. I don't know." "Eli." He stopped. "Breathe," I said. He let out a breath, shaky, and looked at me properly for the first time since he'd started talking. In the low lantern light, his face looked younger than I'd ever seen it, scared in a way I wasn't used to seeing on him. "I don't want you to leave either," I said quietly. Something shifted in his expression, relief and confusion tangled together. "That's not, I mean it more than that. I don't know how to say the rest of it." "Try." He looked down at his hands. "I keep thinking about you in ways I don't think you're supposed to think about your best friend," he said, so quiet I almost missed it under the rain. "And I've been trying to make it stop for like a year and it hasn't, and I don't know what to do with that, and I'm sorry if this ruins everything. I couldn't get on a plane without you knowing. That felt worse than telling you and you never talking to me again." I didn't say anything right away, not because I didn't have an answer, but because I was scared of how easily one was sitting right there, ready. "You're not going to ruin anything," I said finally. "You don't know that." "I do, actually," I took a breath, "because I've been thinking about you the same way for a while. I just didn't have the guts to say it first." He looked up at me like he wasn't sure he'd heard me right. The rain hadn't stopped. Somewhere outside, thunder rolled, distant now, moving away from us instead of toward us. "You're serious," he said. "I'm serious." "Since when?" "Since I don't know, the canoe maybe longer, and I just didn't let myself notice." He laughed, short and disbelieving, rubbing a hand over his face. "We've been sitting 3 feet apart for 3 days having actual heart attacks over nothing." "Feels like it." I almost didn't say anything. I had it all planned out. I was gonna keep it to myself and just go to the new job and let it fade or whatever, and then the tent almost blew away and I just panicked and it fell out of my mouth. "I'm glad it did." "Yes. Yeah." The space between us had shrunk without either of us really deciding to move. His hand was near mine on the tent floor, not quite touching, both of us aware of the inch of space like it had weight. "I don't really know what to do now," he admitted, half laughing, half something more nervous. "Like, logistically, I don't know how this part goes." "I don't either." "Comforting." "I mean it though, I've never done this." "Me neither." We sat there another second, both of us clearly wanting the same thing and neither of us quite brave enough to close the last bit of distance. It was Eli who moved first, slow, like he was giving me every chance to stop him, his hand finding mine on the tent floor, fingers curling around mine carefully, like I might disappear if he moved too fast. "Is this okay?" he asked. "Yeah." The kiss, when it happened, wasn't some cinematic explosion. It was careful and a little clumsy, both of us figuring it out in real time, his hand coming up to rest against my jaw like he wasn't sure that was allowed either. It didn't last long. When we pulled back, we were both breathing a little unevenly, both a little stunned by the very ordinary, very real thing that had just happened between two people who'd known each other for a decade. Okay, Eli said, quiet, like he was trying to convince himself it was real. Okay, that happened. That happened. I'm not imagining this. If you are, I'm having the same hallucination. He laughed again, that same escaping laugh from the hike, except this time I didn't have to pretend not to notice how much I liked it. I wish I could tell you the rest of the trip was easy after that. It wasn't, not entirely. The next morning the sun came back out like the storm had never happened. We were both a little awkward around each other in a way we'd never been before, both of us unsure how to exist in this new version of ourselves. We fumbled through breakfast, careful with our words, careful with how close we stood to each other, like we'd been given something fragile and neither of us wanted to be the one who dropped it. Are we weird now? Eli asked at one point, poking at the eggs he was badly scrambling over the camp stove. A little. Is that bad? I don't think so, I think it's just new. He nodded slowly like that made sense to him, and some of the tension eased out of his shoulders. It was later that day, packing up to leave, that the real fear surfaced, the thing neither of us had said out loud yet. We were folding up the sad, lopsided tent, and Eli went quiet in that particular way he did when something was sitting heavy on him. I still have to take the job, he said, not looking at me. My stomach dropped a little. Oh. Not because I want to leave, I don't, not anymore, but I already signed the paperwork and it's a good opportunity and I can't just, he stopped, frustrated with himself. I don't know what I'm asking you, I don't even know what I'm asking for. You're not asking anything wrong, I said. You built a whole life plan before you knew this was going to happen, that's not your fault. Feels like bad timing. Feels like real life maybe. He looked at me then, searching my face for something. Would you want to try anyway? Long distance, all of it, even though it's messy and inconvenient and we don't know what we're doing. I thought about it, actually thought about it, because I didn't want to answer just because it was the romantic thing to say. I thought about the 4-hour drive that had gotten us here, the years we'd known each other, the way something in me had settled the second his hand found mine in that storm. Yeah, I said, I want to try. It's gonna be hard. Most things worth doing are, I think. He smiled at that, small and a little disbelieving, like he still wasn't sure he was allowed to be this happy. You're gonna have to come visit constantly. You're gonna have to actually text back instead of leaving me on read for 6 hours. That's a low blow and also fair. We didn't figure everything out that day. We didn't have some perfect, tidy plan for how the distance would work, or what we'd tell people, or how fast or slow we wanted to go with any of it. But we had something we hadn't had at the start of the trip, which was the truth, finally sitting out in the open between us instead of hidden under years of careful almost moments neither of us had let ourselves name. He moved 3 weeks later. I drove him to the airport myself, and we stood there in the terminal doing the awkward thing where you don't want to be the one who lets go first, and neither of us said anything particularly profound because by then we'd already said the important things, back in that tent, in the middle of a storm neither of us saw coming in more ways than one. Call me when you land, I said. Obviously. I mean it. I know you do. He kissed me quick, a little self-conscious because of the people around us and pulled back with that same smile from the campsite. This is a stupid amount of feelings for a camping trip. Yeah, I said, it really is. That was 6 years ago now. I won't pretend the distance was easy because it wasn't, not for a long time. There were fights about time zones and missed calls and one truly terrible stretch where we almost gave up on the whole thing because it felt too hard to keep doing from opposite ends of a map. But we didn't give up. He moved back 2 years later once things settled, once we both figured out we didn't actually want a life that didn't have the other person in the same city. The lighters from that trip. It fell out of his jacket pocket last night and I picked it up off the tent floor to put it back for him, and somehow I just never gave it back and he never asked for it. I think we both knew without saying it that it had turned into something worth keeping, this cheap, broken little object that happened to be sitting there the night everything changed. He's in the other room right now, probably still awake, probably going to ask me in a minute why I'm standing in the kitchen holding a lighter that hasn't worked in years. I'll probably just tell him I was cleaning. I don't think I'll tell him I was thinking about the storm and the tent and the exact way his hand felt closing around mine like he thought I might disappear. Some things you don't need to say out loud. You just keep the lighter in the drawer and you let it mean what it means.